The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So the season began in September with visions of a Beltway Super Bowl dancing in our heads. And as we approach Christmas, the Commanders have a Blutarsky chance of making the playoffs, 0.0. And the Baltimore Ravens' chances are now down to 11% and approaching Blutarsky territory. After losing last night to the Patriots, the only way they get in is if they win their last two and the Steelers lose to the Browns next week. And if that happens, that would set up an AFC North championship game between the Steelers and the Ravens. And incredibly, the Steelers have a 42-year-old quarterback who's healthy, and the Ravens have an under-30 quarterback who is not. Hard to believe we got to this point with Christmas week here, but here we are. And if you look around the league, it's not just the Ravens that have quarterback injury problems. It's just about everybody. And it's gotten so bad here that Dan Quinn is talking about bringing in a quarterback off the street maybe today to play on Thursday against the Dallas Cowboys. At the moment, it's day-to-day with Marcus Mariota, and it doesn't sound good. It's not just the stitches that he took in his hand after being stepped on by the Eagles, a great metaphor for that game, by the way. He also has got a quad injury, and Quinn says he's day-to-day on that. So that leaves Josh Johnson, who's 39 years old, and all he does is sign with teams and never play. And when you have to play him, as we saw, doesn't look good. Threw a really stupid interception and was not any kind of a factor at all in a possible comeback against the defending champs. And then behind him, you have Sam Hartman, who was so god-awful in the preseason that they had to keep Josh Johnson. And the only reason that they've kept Hartman around is he's got kind of this little bro relationship, or older bro, because I guess he's about a year older, with Jaden Daniels. And if you saw him in the preseason, and I don't blame you if you don't, if you didn't, but in the preseason, he completed 54% of his passes for 207 yards, no touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. 4 interceptions playing against guys who are probably driving bread trucks now. That's how bad Sam Hartman was, and he's never taken a regular season snap. So the quarterback situation here is an absolute disaster. And heading into the Cowboy game, where the Cowboys generally hang a bunch of points on Washington with a still healthy Dak Prescott coming to town, the prognosis that Dan Quinn delivered on Mariota yesterday, not good at all.
I don't know the amount of stitches, John. The quad and the hand happened on the same play. It was a cleat that got to his hand on the top. But I don't know yet. It's swollen. So I'd say we're going to call it day-to-day right now of where it's at, both with the hand and with the quad. And so let's see, what tomorrow is and the following day. Then I'd say by, 2 days from now, we'll have a very good estimate of where he's at.
Now, remember, this is Dan Quinn, who has played it ultra safe on injuries. And if you're wondering about Jaden Daniels, who is still on the active roster, which complicates things as well, because I don't think you could put Mariota on injured reserve because you'd like to have him available for the last game of the season against the Eagles, and it's a 4-game minimum. So you have to keep him on the roster. They're keeping Daniels on the roster. Maybe they could put him on injured reserve since he's not going to play, but that means he couldn't practice. So that's a problem there as well. And then, Sam Hartman, my God, if and Josh Johnson, remember, he was the quarterback who came in for Brock Purdy in the NFC Championship game a few years ago when Purdy hurt his elbow, and he got knocked out with a concussion, forcing Purdy to come back and just hand off. They knew he couldn't throw. He couldn't throw it more than 2 yards. So this is just an absolute mess in a season that has gone down the tubes, and it went down the tubes early. And on top of everything else, you're going to have trouble getting just any healthy bodies out there on Thursday. Here's the list of injuries that Quinn ticked off yesterday. Jalen Lane, they're pretty much counting him out after being knocked out early in the Eagle game with an ankle injury. Then you got Mariota, who you just heard Quinn talk about. Then there's Brandon Coleman, who was subbing for Laramie Tunsil. He went down with a shin injury. We don't know if Tunsil is going to be available to play against the Cowboys. If I'm Tunsil, I'm making sure I'm not available for that mess. And then Sam Cosmi and Johnny Newton, both in concussion protocol. And Newton got his concussion during a period of time where the game was over and Dan Quinn is calling timeouts just, I don't know, to get the ball back. I mean, on top of that, some curious calls in that Eagle game. They lost, as you know, 29-18, but when it was a, game that they could conceivably get back into, when it was 21-10, he punted twice. And this was his answer yesterday as to why he this was actually on Saturday. This was Quinn, the question of what he was doing in what looked like a game that they could possibly get back into, as they always say, a 2-possession game when you're down 11. What are you doing here?
You punted twice in the fourth quarter. I think 4th and 4, 4th and 6 with like 9 minutes left, 6 minutes left, 11-point game. What was the thinking on punting rather than going for those?
Sure. On the first one, I think I was just referring to that earlier. At that point, we still had 3 timeouts. There was over 9 minutes. I thought that was, good result. What you want is go get a 3 and out, get a stop. We did that. And so, thought going into it again, could you do that again? And when you don't, and we let the long run, obviously, strategy-wise, not ideal. Obviously, like quarterback change, like all those things factor in. It's not just as easy as why not go here, why not? In hindsight, 2020. On the early one, I felt there's still plenty of time, all timeouts. Could we go get a stop? I'd like the way, we've been playing. And so, you think you can go replicate that. And we didn't with the long run. So I'd say on the first one, I thought it was probably the right call. On the second one, you probably roll the dice and see where you can go. Looking back on it now, at the time, I thought get another punt, get another stop, get back into the game. I just didn't feel like we had to decide it then at 4th and 5 was not easy against this crew. Especially with new QB in the game. But, that's fair criticism by you.
Yeah, look, what happened to last year? They went games without punting. The go-for-it mentality that they had. Where is that? Especially with the team with the record that they have, not just the record that they have now coming out of the game, but the record that they had going into the game at 3-10. Well, what do they have to lose? What? Now, he did mention the quarterback there. Okay, he's playing a backup quarterback. Well, actually, a third-string quarterback at this point. But, dance with the one who brung you. And he kind of was taken aback by this when he shouldn't have been when his record was mentioned.
What does it say about a team like this that's now sitting at 4-11 but is still up for the fight? Yeah,
it certainly feels terrible to hear that record. And that's hard. That's difficult. Based on what I saw at practice, I thought these guys would really play hard. Like, came off the week, went back to it again. And so I sensed, from what the energy I felt from them, the preparation, I felt this is a group that's ready to go do their thing. No one in our locker room, is talking about who we don't have or who wasn't there, those things. And so it was about how we'd go win it. And that was really the only thing on our mind. But I'd expect that from them. I expect that from them this week, as we prepare again, how we go about it and how we go. But it's an excellent group of guys. Like that part, it's a matter of, can we go finish the whole thing? But I do love the way that the energy they came out with.
Nikki, last one. Maybe a strange question, but just when everybody was shaking hands, just kind of noticed that you were hanging back and just seemed to watch and
I just want to make sure anything didn't go sideways, and so into that spot. I know how quickly we're going to play again, so I just wanted to make sure if I had to step into any space that I'd be able to bring my bouncing skills back into space. I just felt like, man, this is not the time to lose somebody post game into a game, just 5 days away. So it's one thing to say the poise, but it's another thing when you're the person in that moment. And so I just thought that was the best course of action. Everything was fine on both sides. Their guys, our guys. It was nothing I had to worry about. I just, that was my thoughts.
Well, that's Quinn on Saturday, but here's more that he has to worry about. On top of the huge laundry list of injuries, you got Javon Kinlaw and Quan Martin, 2 starters, kicked out of the game. They could be suspended for Thursday's game. I think that's entirely possible. We had it earlier with Deron Payne, who didn't get to trip to Madrid because he got thrown out of the Detroit game for throwing a punch. I think that's totally in play. And with the day to marinate on this, this was Quinn again yesterday with the follow-up on the fight.
Man, I'm disappointed it came to punches. Neither team wants that. Our game's emotion-filled, but you don't want to be emotional, so shouldn't happen. Both teams were definitely in the wrong for that. You play good, hard, tough, physical games, but that's what we want, both sides. And so you don't want it to go past that. But I didn't find a lot. The broadcast didn't get extended on that, John, so I was hoping that I'd give you some more insights. But I looked through all the angles that I had, and I just honestly didn't get a lot to, go from on that. But what I do know is, neither team wants that, and it shouldn't happen. And when it gets to punches on both sides, it's not what we want, either side.
So that's Dan Quinn yesterday. Now let's look at what led to this fight. And it's really foolish, but these things happen in the NFL because there's some kind of unwritten code as to what you're supposed to do according to what the score is. So we got a game that, again, it was still a game at that point, but then the Eagles score, and they make it 27-10. And, okay, so you go, kick the extra point, 28-10. But instead, they go for the 2-point conversion. And the 2-point conversion with less than 5 minutes left in the game, and game that's essentially over, why are you doing that? And so, they got their dander up, and that's what started all the pushing and the shoving and eventually the punch throwing. This was Bobby Wagner, not on the field, but the elder spokesman for this team.
It is what it is, bro. I don't care. Is it disrespectful? Maybe, but we still got to stop him. And so that's how I look at it. We got to stop him, and we'll see him in a couple weeks.
All right, so we got some extenuating circumstances here, which I'd like to talk about. The Tank Bigsby 22-yard touchdown run. They're up 27-10. And they go for 2, which is what gets these guys kicked out of the game, along with Tyler Steen for Philadelphia. So you got 3 players kicked out of the game. And Mikey Sanderstill said afterwards, he said, I just know I saw my brothers out there. He wasn't on the field there, so I'm going to do everything to protect my brothers. He's in on it. The fight morphed into the rallying cry for the brotherhood, as Tom Libero writes. Sanderstill was asked what it says about the team still battling for each other despite the way the season has gone. And he said, that's the way we are. That's our standard. Doesn't matter if it's an up-and-down season, whatever it is. All you can do is take advantage of the opportunity in front of you, and you're going to make sure that you use every chance that you get. Okay, that's one way to look at it. But this is a Philadelphia Eagles team which doesn't have much brotherhood right now. The fans are all upset that they're not scoring enough points. They hate the quarterback. They hate the coach. That's what they do in Philadelphia, as Tom writes. And here's the Commanders keeping their brotherhood, but also doing something really stupid and getting involved in these fights. And, for what good? For a roster that's just a mess in terms of players off the team for injury. Now you're going to have the possibility of 2 more suspensions for starters. I mean, it's just a complete meltdown for a team that was the magical carpet ride of last year. Now, let me throw this in because I don't think I've heard anybody discuss this, but I think this is an important element of Philadelphia going for 2 there. If you're watching the game, you know that Jake Elliott was a mess. Jake Elliott missed 3 field goals. Once when he got an extra try because of a penalty, still missed it. And he did hit 1 field goal, but I think at the point they were at, when they score the touchdown to make it 27-10, and you would certainly kick the extra point in most cases to make it 28-10. That in fact they went for 2 because they wanted to make it more than 18. Like conceivably, the Commanders could get to 18. That's what Sirianni said. What he didn't want to say was he wasn't going to throw Jake Elliott out there again to miss an extra point. He just couldn't do that. And I don't know whether they're going to release him today or not. I don't think they are. It doesn't sound like they are. They've had too much success with him, and they're going to ride this out. But it reminded me of Max Zendejas. And Max Zendejas, if you remember, in the 1986 season, when Mark Mosley actually psyched out his cousin in training camp, Jesse Zendejas, who was there to take his job. Mosley won the job, but then he began to struggle as the 86 season went on. They finally cut him, the legendary Mark Mosley, the only kicker to win an MVP. He was cut, and they brought in Jesse's cousin, Max Zendejas. And over the course of about 5 or 6 games, incredibly, when the extra point was hiked from the 2-yard line, so whatever it was like a 20-yard, 19-yard field goal. He missed 5 of them that year. He missed 1 in a game against Minnesota that turned out to be a classic with Jay Schrader hitting Gary Clark in overtime for a 44-38 win. But that sent the game to overtime, missing an extra point. A couple of weeks later, they're playing the Denver Broncos on the road. He misses an extra point. They lose the game 31-30. As it turned out, he got paid for the rest of the season because he, in using a space heater to warm his foot, suffered second-degree burns, forcing the Redskins to put him on injured reserve, and they brought in Jess Atkinson, who kicked them to the NFC Championship game where he didn't provide any points because they got shut out by the Giants 17-0. But it could have been that the Eagles feared, one, the psychological damage that would be done by missing an extra point, and if he pulls his hamstring on a extra point attempt, he's on the hook to be paid for the rest of the year. I know it's only a couple more games, but, maybe it was a budgetary thing. Maybe they knew they were going to cut him. We'll find out later today if that happens. But that played into it. So, very few people, I think, would think of Max Zendejas in that situation, but I did. And that goes back almost 40 years, but I think that was part of the picture there. I don't think it was Sirianni trying to rub their noses in it. I may be wrong, but that's the way I saw it. I thought he was trying to protect his kicker, Jake Elliott, who had a nightmare of a day, and he was fortunate for his team that they won in a blowout way. All right, coming up, I want to get to something that is not just a mess for Georgetown, but it addresses the state of journalism right now, and it's, I think, very concerning for the Washington Post and other journalism outlets. What happened on Saturday night was disgraceful for Georgetown and their coach, who gets a slap on the wrist, a big deal, knocked out of a game against Coppin State tonight, so what? But the coverage of this for the Washington Post is absolutely stunning, and I'll get to more on that as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So, where do I begin with this? As you may know, I've talked about this. I was a subscriber to the Washington Post, the actual newspaper, for over 30 years, and when they jacked the price up over $500, that was my breaking point, and I said, okay, I'm not going to get the paper delivered anymore, but I'm going to pay $170 a year for the online access. A little more than I want to pay. Seems like a lot, but okay. In order to get the paper that I've been reading since I was a kid. In fact, I probably learned how to read reading the Washington Post. So I wasn't going to completely cut the cord, but the actual paper is just getting too expensive. So I see early on Sunday morning, I didn't watch the game because I was watching football, but I see that in the Georgetown loss to Xavier, Ed Cooley, the coach, had thrown a water bottle into the stands, and it hit a mother who was with her child watching the game a couple of rows behind the bench. Now, I don't know if in fact she has any relation with the players, but usually that's where the families sit. So I imagine it was likely a relative of a player. And I thought, wow, you got to be kidding me. This is not – sounds pretty close to Bobby Knight throwing a chair. The game 40 years ago that launched the famous book Season on the Brink. That's some serious stuff. The head coach of Georgetown, after losing a league game, a Big East game. Remember how big Big East games used to be when John Thompson coached the team? The games against Syracuse, the big battles that they had against Villanova. What? He threw a water bottle into the stands and hit a child? What? It's after they lose 80-77 when one of his players missed a potential game-tying three-pointer at the buzzer. This is what happened. Oh my God! If this is John Thompson, this is A1. This is as big a story as you will have in sports, even with the Commanders playing on the same night. So I go to the Washington Post website, and I click on sports. I even click on the college sports area. I mean, it's a little bit different navigating this than it was the actual paper, but I'm sure they're going to have something big on this, right? Oh, yeah, you got to have some details on it. I mean, there was a time when a young Michael Wilbon covered Georgetown, and he would have had even more than was in the press conference because he would have taken John Thompson aside and gotten some exclusive information on this. I mean, if anybody was going to have more on this story, this little thing I saw on Twitter about Ed Cooley throwing a water bottle, it would certainly be the Washington Post. What I got was what we call a wire story. But beyond that, it's so much worse than that because there was a time, and he's now retired, but Dave Ginsburg was the bureau chief for the Associated Press sports department. And if Dave couldn't cover a game, and like, for example, with the Commanders playing as well on Saturday, he likely would have been covering that, but he would have hired somebody, or the Associated Press would have hired what's called a stringer, a freelance person, to cover the game. Al Koken did a lot of that before he got involved in Caps coverage, and there are others who got their start in the business doing it. Somebody would have been there, would have been boots on the ground for the game. Oh, no. This is the extent of the Washington Post coverage right after, or really the day after. If it was an actual newspaper, there would be a banner story. Coach throws water bottle into stands after loss. Big East game. Georgetown story program in town. I mean, the enormous impact that Georgetown basketball has had, not just in Washington, but across the country. I mean, if you look at the history of the game, John Thompson is one of the most important figures, and the school's program that he built has become one of the most important. No. Gene Wong, who covers college sports, who's become sort of like a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest at this point. A couple of weeks ago, he covered the Army-Navy game in Baltimore and then hustled down to College Park to cover the second half of the Michigan game, the Michigan basketball game for Maryland. And wrote two stories. I mean, this is like the Mayberry newspaper at this point. This is a Washington Post, Woodward and Bernstein. And what I got, it wasn't just an Associated Press story. At least if you would have had a reporter there for the Associated Press, the lead would have been Georgetown coach Ed Cooley apologized in a post-game news conference for throwing a water bottle in the stands after a loss to Xavier that hit a mother and a child. That's the lead to the story. This is the lead from the Associated Press story that appeared in the Washington Post after Georgetown lost a home league game to Xavier by 3 points. This is the lead. Trey Carroll scored 22 points as Xavier beat Georgetown 80-77 on Saturday, and goes over some more of his stats. Georgetown leading scorer Malik Mack, 21 points, yada, yada, yada. But here's the worst part. At the bottom of the story, it says, the Associated Press created this story using technology provided by Data Scribe and Sports Radar. This is AI. All they did was take the box score and create a game story for arguably the most important, or 1A with Maryland. There's only two teams in this area who've won national championships. One of them was Maryland and one of them was Georgetown. And poor Gene Wong, he can't cover this game because he's in Charlottesville, rightfully so, covering Maryland and Virginia, two schools of interest to the readership. And they don't play that often, so that's a pretty big deal. And he went to cover. He couldn't be at Georgetown at the same time. Couldn't have been downtown D.C. and in Charlottesville at the same time. So that's all we had in the Washington Post until Gene got back and yesterday wrote a follow-up story which provided the details. But no mention of Cooley throwing the water bottle, which was the story. And if John Thompson had done something like that 30 years ago, that would have been on A1, probably above the fold. I mean, it's mind-blowing at this point. And, maybe the Washington Post sports department, which, I've got friends there and I've loved reading it for my entire life, over 60 years, it may go the way of what the New York Times did in using The Athletic to cover there. Not that the people at The Athletic don't do a great job. In fact, they pretty much raided the Washington Post sports department. Nikki Giavallo used to be the beat writer for the Commanders, now works for The Athletic. Dan Steinberg, who was an editor, now works for The Athletic. I think they've hired, David Aldridge, who, has done a lot of television, but also has done newspaper work for the Washington Post at one time. Later, I think the Philadelphia Inquirer. They, as a team, cover the area sports. So that's the way this has got to go, because it's not just that you're using the Associated Press to cover a home game. They don't have to travel anybody. A home game, the cost of a Metro pass to head down to the arena to cover the game. They didn't have anybody there. They're relying on the Associated Press, who, on top of everything else, didn't have anybody there either. The Associated Press relied on AI to use a box score to write about a game which included a major event, which has led to, so far, I wonder as this thing unravels, so far it is a one-game suspension for Ed Cooley, which he will serve tonight against whoop-de-doo Coppin State. I think they can manage to win without him. But there was a reprimand from the school, from the athletic department. Athletic Director Ed Reed said, "I met with Coach Cooley today to discuss the incident." This is from yesterday, which occurred after last night's game against Xavier. "I expressed that his conduct did not align with the standards we expect of our coaches, nor does it reflect the values of Georgetown Athletics or Georgetown University." And as Cooley opened up his news conference, he was still steaming, and we'll get to his rage because that's a part of this story too. This was Cooley's opening statement after the loss to Xavier on Saturday.
First and foremost, I have to apologize to the Nyakun family. Really frustrated, didn't realize I threw my water bottle and it hit Messiah and his mom. So, definitely out of character for me to be so frustrated. But really, that's not called for, and I'll call them and make amends to that. Just totally out of character or frustration. So I apologize to the fans. I apologize to our players, university. Totally out of character for me to be that way.
I don't know how happy they were about being named. I'm not sure about that. Maybe he checked with them. I don't know. But that was minutes after that game ended. And while he had cooled down to some degree, there was still steam coming out of his ears.
We gift wrapped a home game. And we didn't deserve to win today. We did not deserve to win today. The team that won deserved to win. They made the right plays. They had decent leadership. Our leadership today was negative. That's on me. I trust our men that are out there. We give them a lot of freedom to grow, get better. But when I don't see us connected, I don't see us communicating, and I see how soft we played, we were effing soft. We were cool. My bad, all the my bads ended up to a home effing loss in our building. Unacceptable. Get out rebounded, miss all those free throws. That's very frustrating to me. The better team won today. The team that earned the win won today. Our leadership was horrendous. And it starts right with the dude that's talking to you right now.
Okay. There was some stronger words used than effing. On top of that, the Associated Press story written by AI and the Washington Post did not include those two key statistics that he gave you there. Didn't give you the numbers. They were out-rebounded 45-36. And the free throws, this is beyond comprehension for a Division I team. These are high school numbers. They were 25 of 43 from the line. They missed 18 free throws in a 3-point loss. Well, okay. News conference goes on, and I'll give Cooley credit for standing up there and sitting there as long as he did. He didn't slam his fist on the table and leave, and he did apologize for what he did. And there's another apology, which I will get to, which he released yesterday after the suspension. But listen here as and this is, I'm laughing here. It's really not funny, but it's like he starts out where he's thinking to himself, okay, I'm not gonna overreact. I know I've said some things here. I know I threw the water bottle, so I'm gonna try and stay calm, but it doesn't last.
I'm not saying it's concerning, and I don't want to overreact. You know what I mean? We're growing, right? I thought we were ahead of where we were today. We will show some film. We'll show some film so they can see it, right? And I'm not going to overreact. I'm disappointed. I'm very, very disappointed. Extremely disappointed to lose a damn home game. To lose a home game, right? We knew a team was going to come in and be hungry to play, right? But if you don't have the will and fight, right, that's not something that you can coach. You either got it or you don't. You either want to defend and want to rebound or you don't. So I have to address that. Am I allocating the right minutes to the guys that are playing?
So he says he's not going to overreact, but then he slams his fist on the table and repeats home game 3 times. He's really steamed. And even at the end, this was the last question. It sounded like somebody young. It obviously was not a reporter from either the Associated Press or the Washington Post because they didn't have anybody there. It sounded like it might have been a kid. I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. I'm saying a student, a young student from the student newspaper who wanted to, it sounded like, cheer up the old coach who knows he's going to be facing a suspension. I think Cooley realized that by the time he got to the news conference. And the fact that he's just really ripped angry mad at his team. He just and remember, we're in a new world here. So these are not only the players that he recruited, these are the players that he negotiated money with. So it's not like it was even like 5 years ago where he could look at recruited players and say, you guys suck. He's saying to professional athletes, you got no leadership. You're soft. You can't do it. And we lost a home game. And so here's a young person. He may be associated with a professional outlet here. I don't know, but I'm guessing that he's with the student newspaper, and he's like offering a chance for Ed Cooley to kind of like, there's a silver lining here.
At the end of the day, this was a 3-point game. Does that give you hope that you can kind of?
No, it doesn't. Give zero hope. This should have been a win at home. You play at home, you got to win games, right? You miss 18 free throws. You don't deserve to win. I'd rather lose by 100 than lose the way we just lost today, right? Very disappointing. I'd rather lose by 900 than that we saw there today. That was grossly, grossly misled from our leadership and from me. So hopefully we can correct that.
Well, we'll see. They won't be Cooley coaching tonight against Coppin State. That's not the real test. But this is what Cooley said after the suspension was announced. Jeff Battle, the assistant coach, will take over tonight. And after athletic director Ed Reed announced the suspension, Cooley put out a statement. My conduct was unacceptable, does not represent who I am or the leader I strive to be. I want to also apologize to the Georgetown community, teams, fans, the league, and my family. I take full responsibility for my actions and their consequences. I will learn from this experience to ensure it never happens again. I think the school needs to ensure that it never happens again. And I think the Bobby Knight edict that came down from the late Miles Brand and now the late Bobby Knight, but he at the beginning of must have been the year that they played Maryland in the might have been the year they won the national championship. So this might have been 2001 when Miles Brand went into the season. The president of Indiana and said Bobby Knight is on a no tolerance policy. In other words, if there's something else that happens, he's gone. And in fact, some kid walking by Knight on campus said, "Hey, Knight," and Knight went over to grab him by the wrist with witnesses, and that was when Bobby Knight was fired. I think Cooley is got to be under the same thing from Georgetown, where he says this won't happen again. I will learn from this experience, ensure it never happens again. They're going to have to make sure it never happens again because this is pretty close to Bobby Knight. Hey, Bobby Knight threw a chair. I believe it landed at the feet of some person sitting near the court, but there really wasn't danger for a fan to be hit by the chair. What Cooley did with a water bottle, and if you see the video online, he's just not tossing it underhand into the stands. He chucks it. And if that hits the kid in the eye or, has some type of force to it that a young child might get a concussion off of that, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely insane. And again, if John Thompson does this or anybody, Lefty Drizel, Gary Williams, anybody, if they do it, this is front page news. You can't do this. And, I feel bad for friends at the Washington Post like Gene Wong, who has to cover this entire beat by himself and can't possibly do it. And I guess there's no money to hire freelancers, what we call stringers, to cover this game. This is a black eye on both Georgetown and the Washington Post for the way they covered it. And the fact that it's not being played up more, I don't think this is going to get a lot of legs in the media today in town. And no disrespect to anybody who does television or radio around here. This just isn't going to be on the radar. This is all going to be about everybody else is talking about, who's going to quarterback the Commanders on Sunday and, the fight that happened. And all that's important. But this is a major story which got nothing, not just from the Post, but for this wire service that they pay for. I know how this works. I work for the Associated Press. I work for the late UPI. I know how this works. They pay for these services, and they are supplemental to what you do for exactly this type of circumstance, that the person for the Washington Post who covers sports, college sports, couldn't possibly be in two places at once. So Gene Wong did the right thing, whether it was his decision or the editor's decision. He went to Charlottesville to cover the Maryland and Virginia game, and the Georgetown game was left to the Associated Press, where it should be assumed that the coverage would be sufficient enough so that if a coach throws a water bottle into the stands and hits a fan, causing a suspension for one game, there is an actual mention of it in the coverage rather than an AI story written off a box score. I mean, where are we? This is 2025. I know what's going on in the world of journalism. I know what's happening to it. And in some ways it's trickled down to me. I'm very fortunate to still be doing this, but I can see where there was a time where things would have been a lot different in my industry for me and for many others. And now, one of the bastions of journalism in this country is relying on a wire service, which used to have some real reliability on things like this and can't be held reliable because they write game stories off a box score with AI. It just doesn't work. It does not work. And it came to bite them this time. And then you're good for Gene Wong for following up yesterday with a follow-up story, but that's not how news works these days. So most people got what I got. Little tweet here. Ed Cooley threw a water bottle. Well, how about the details? Why did it happen? Did it hit anybody? What was the reaction? What did he say about it? Nothing. I had to go to the news conference online to find out what happened. Wow. Crazy. All right, coming up, more on the Commanders situation as they try to get enough healthy bodies to play on Thursday. Maybe a street quarterback is walking in. And speaking of that, 44-year-old Phillip Rivers tonight plays game 2 of his incredible comeback. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. So did you pay a lot of attention to the college football playoffs over the weekend? Yeah, a couple of them were stinkers. Actually, 3 of them. At least it was close. Only good game was on Friday night. And they got a problem with this event, which is now at 12. 8 would have been enough, like the name of that old TV series from the 70s. It seems to be headed for 24. And I think this horse has gotten away from them. They got to catch it and saddle it up and get it back under control, because they're facing a big issue here, which we will delve into this hour. Also more on the Commanders situation. Looks pretty bleak right now as they head into the Dallas game on Thursday. The line, surprisingly low. They're only 5.5-point underdogs against the Cowboys. I realize the Cowboys are out of it too, but they always hang a lot of points on Washington. And they're, relatively speaking, healthy. At least they got a quarterback. Washington? Oh, man. They're looking at signing somebody off the street today so he can be available to play on Thursday. Josh Johnson, who only sticks on rosters because apparently he's good in the locker room and he's okay being a third-string guy. He's been everywhere. He's played in every league. He's played on 14 different teams, including this one twice. And at the age of 39, I think he's been in professional football, not the NFL, because I think it's the NFL's like 11 years. Other leagues supplement the other 6. He's won one game. I think he's made 5 starts, 6 starts. The one game he won was that awful 2018 season where Alex Smith broke his leg, and they had to bring in, they brought in quarterback after quarterback. They were hoping to play Colt McCoy. He got hurt, as he always did. And then finally, Josh Johnson won like the second or third to last game of the year, and that's his only NFL win. At the age of 39. And so he's around. And what did you see when he came in on Saturday? You saw him throw a really stupid interception and was really in no position to bring them back in that game after Marcus Mariota was knocked out. Now, Dan Quinn has said that Mariota is day-to-day. He's leaving open the possibility he can play Thursday, but he took stitches in his hand. And I think even more concerning is the quad injury, because Mariota, if he can't move, that's a big part of his game. And they played it ultra safe with Jaden. He was asked, well, at this point, you're an emergency. Well, can't you just play Jaden? Nope, not going to play him. And Sam Hartman, the only reason Josh Johnson is on the team is because Sam Hartman was horrendous in the preseason. He threw 4 interceptions and no touchdowns, and his passing percentage was 54%, which in this day and age is terrible. And so he's still around because Jaden likes him and, having another arm on the practice squad. So what? But the problem that they have is that you are keeping, and maybe they're going to change this, but you're keeping Jaden Daniels on the active roster so he can practice. If you put him on IR, he can't practice. And that means that you've got Marcus Mariota, who, although he's injured and may not be able to play this week, the hope is he could play 10 days after that in the season finale at Philadelphia, which I think is going to be on the 4th. Still a possibility to be played on the 3rd, but somewhere in there they're going to play on the 4th, and they need him for that. So if you bring in another quarterback, what are you going to do? And if you promote Sam Hartman from the practice squad and he's got to play, hide your eyes, because this could really get ugly, and it's on national TV on Christmas Day. They got a real mess there. It's an absolute mess. The only positive, I guess, you could bring out from the loss on Saturday, because you got the fight to deal with and the possibility that you're going to lose 2 starters. Quan Martin could go. He could be suspended from that game. And they also have Javon Kinlaw, who got kicked out of the game. Both those guys are facing a suspension for this game on top of all the other injuries. They're just overflowing with injuries at this point. The Marcus Mariota situation, Jalen Lane, Dan Quinn said yesterday, most likely not going to play, knocked out with an ankle injury early in the game on Saturday. And then you have Brandon Coleman, who went down in this game with a shin injury. He was in for Laramie Tunsil, who may or may not be able to play because of an oblique injury. He didn't play in this last game. Sam Cosmi suffered a concussion. He's in protocol. They're checking him out. And Johnny Newton, in what turned out to be a meaningless snap, also suffered a concussion. We don't know if those guys are going to be able to play, 5 days after that game. The positive was, and it wasn't somebody jumping over the pile like happened last year, Frankie Louvu in that playoff game, but they actually were effective against the tush push. They got one of them was a false start, and they actually stopped it once. So Quinn, when he did his follow-up news conference yesterday, could actually say, okay, that was pretty good.
We were expecting the play. It's funny, we talked about offsides or alignments and those kind of things as it pertains to the offense, Ben. So I was pleased to see them call the false start. I think it's a really hard play for them to officiate from where they're standing. It almost seems like on the tush push they may have to adjust where they stand and align. They sometimes seem like they're so far away for a play that everybody's in close. So maybe that's in consideration for it. But I was, it was good to see that it was called on that one because it's a difficult play to defend and it's a difficult play to officiate. But it was good to see us get the stop on the first one. I think on the second one, they had jumped off sides. But it was definitely one that we had put some work in on for sure.
Yeah, the officials are calling it more closely now, so it's not as effective as it used to be, which means it's probably going to stay because they almost got rid of it last year. And early in the season, I think it was Tom Brady in an early season game, that game that they played, the Super Bowl rematch, who was pointing out that they were false starting all the time, and the officials couldn't see it because it was all happening under the pile. So they're officiating it differently, and it's not as effective as it used to be. And at least in this 29-18 otherwise debacle, they did that. But when Philadelphia went for 2 rather than the 1, where it was like 27-10 when they made it 27-10 and should have made it 28. They went for 2, made it 29. That caused the fight, which caused the ejections. And I think it was more related to the fact that Jake Elliott, the Eagles kicker, was having a nightmare of a day. Missed 3 field goals. I don't think that Nick Sirianni wanted to put him out there to miss an extra point. That I think played into it in a big way. And this is probably a good thing. Not that you have fights, but at least if you have a rivalry, which they really hadn't had in a long time because they stunk, the fact that they did split the regular season games with Philadelphia, and okay, they lost to them in the NFC Championship game, but when you play a team 3 times, you build up a rivalry. And Saquon Barkley, now in his second year with Philadelphia, mentioned this after the game.
We look back at one point, the fans was fighting in the thing, and I guess it kind of carried over to the game. But it's chippy out there, and we have a lot of history with this team, especially since I've been here, and then they have it in the past. But this team don't like us. It's just the truth. And we don't like them either.
Okay, well, he's only been in Philly 2 years. Here's Terry McLaurin, 7th year in Washington. He's played a lot of Philly games.
Eagles versus Commanders, man. That's how it goes. You know what I mean? It gets physical. It gets testy. I can't speak for what was going on specifically on that play because I was on the sideline. But, it comes with this game with these 2 opponents. You know what I mean? There's, a lot of history, obviously, and they were beating us, so they're not going to throw in the towel. They're not going to take it easy on us. They're trying to go for 2 and bury us. And as a team, it's not like you tell them don't go for 2. We got to stop them. Offensively, we got to help our defense. So, I don't really take any bad blood from what they did, but you don't really want to see the game get out of hand and guys possibly getting hurt in those situations. But it comes with this rivalry between us and them, and I don't think that'll ever change, to be honest.
Well, we got another game coming up in a couple of weeks, and on Saturday, Dan Quinn was a little chesty, like, okay, well, if that's the way they want to do it, we'll see him in a couple of weeks. Yesterday, when he had his chance to review the fight and think about it for a while, it's sort of like now, okay, I may have said something pretty chesty on Saturday. The message to the players is a little different now.
I don't want those punches thrown. Both teams want to play tough, want to have good, battles, and I loved so much of the first half of the game of, a physical game, but never where we're crossing the line on either team. So we want it tough, we want it physical, but never to where, somebody's getting jammed up on punches thrown, penalties, all of that. We can play tough, we can play physical, and we can do it without punching. Both teams know that, and that'll certainly be, brought across to our team. But I'll let Nick, handle his team. But, yeah, definitely not what we want, and both sides, that'll be a big emphasis for us for sure.
Okay, so let's see what happens when they meet a week from Sunday. Could be Saturday as well. But 2 teams going in opposite directions, and it's uncertain where Philadelphia is going to be. So it's possible they'll be resting a lot of regulars in that game if they don't have anything to play for. But there still is the possibility of where they might be in terms of they're going to win the division. They've already done that. They've clinched that. But it may have to do with home field, depending on how things shake out as the playoffs go on. They will open the playoffs at home as a division champion. It's just a matter of if they win that and get to the next level, whether it's going to be a home game or on the road. So they may have something to play for. Something that popped up over the weekend, which was kind of fun. As you know, the Rich Eisen Show, which you hear here on ESPN 630 from noon to 3 every day, is based in Los Angeles, and he gets a lot of actors to show up on the show. So this was a couple of years ago. It was based on the Showtime book by Jeff Pearlman, and it was called Winning Time. It was about the Lakers of the 1980s. And you can argue with what they did in terms of how they portrayed people, and there was a lot of fallout for the way that Jason Clarke, who, by the way, you're going to hear his real voice here in a second, but the way that Jason Clarke played Jerry West as a complete psychopath. And people who knew West pushed back on that. Jerry West didn't like it. And it was an angry performance. They did 2 seasons of the show, probably, 20 episodes, 22 episodes, whatever it was. And Jerry West was usually angry.
Paul Revere should have slept in. Let the British burn this coal to the ground.
And he used a word that we can't use here, but you get the picture. He hated Boston because that's where he lost all those championship games when he was playing with the Lakers. And then when he became the general manager, he still had that anger and never went to Boston, hated Boston. Okay, so this is Jason Clarke, who played Jerry West on the Showtime series, on the Rich Eisen Show, talking about the reaction to his character, in particular from Jerry West.
It was upsetting. It was not that he didn't like it. I don't mind the joke. So it upset me to think that it upset him, because I really loved who he was and what he'd done and what he stood for and all the things that he brought. And, there was a kind of a style, waver within that. I mean, I thought we were making, a John C. Reilly, a much more a slightly heightened version of what this 80s poster pin-up world was, not a docudrama. And,
right.
But, that said, I took everything from his book, and a lot of the criticisms that some people seem to have was like, didn't you read Jerry's book and his dark heart and the hole he had and the rage he had and the golf club breaking, it's like he did break his golf clubs famously, and he talked about in the book, it's all there. I might have raised it up a little bit, but I wanted to make him memorable and cool and exciting, and that those, like the Testarossa and the 930 Turbo posters and all the pictures of these great players we all had on our walls.
I did love the show.
So did I.
The show was fantastic, and Jeff Pearlman has sat in this chair.
Yeah.
He's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And I just think some of the West family was upset at the portrayal of his anger wasn't always so flashpoint in that regard.
It wasn't so flashpoint, but when you've got, I can get that. I texted his son when he passed away.
You did?
I didn't want to comment or anything publicly, but
of course.
And he sent me the loveliest text back, and he always hoped, and we hoped to get together at some point,
right,
with Jerry. And my answer, because I love this, my answer to that is like, I just wanted, you're bringing the heart on the sleeve to the few scenes that I have as Jerry West.
Yes, sir.
That show was not about Jerry, but I wanted to make him memorable and dynamic and, one of the baddest asses around in that business that just had such a passion to win and to be the best and succeed and bring the best out of his players that it upset him, which is what he talked about a lot, and what he's carrying. So, yes, I maintained the rage a little bit too much, but it was like, I had X amount of scenes to bring Jerry's passion, which I thought was deeper and stronger than anybody else.
Well, the thing that I also heard on the flip side about the complete accuracy was his, I guess, inability at times to watch the live games, that he would just be in the hallways.
We had some scenes of those too,
in the basement of the bowels, if you will, of the arenas.
Yeah, and he refused to go to Boston. He never stepped foot there again.
Yeah, after losing those championships, said, I'm never going back to Boston, even when the Lakers were playing all those games there. And West couldn't even watch it. He would sit in his car and listen on the radio. That was, and he had, if you read the biography, it's pretty amazing. He had quite a life growing up in West Virginia, and I did not like the portrayal that Jason Clarke did. I thought it was way over the top, but the show was good. The show was good. I thought you want to hear that. Anyway, Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.